In her opening statement before the committee, Representative Jasmine Crockett made a series of serious allegations about power, accountability, and corruption at the highest levels of government. Her remarks go beyond party politics and raise questions about how federal authority is being used and who is being protected. Let's listen to what she said.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for calling this hearing. Since January, Donald Trump has used the full power of the federal government to attack Americans in cities across the country. In Donald Trump's America, you are at increased risk of experiencing militaristic operations in your home, increased risk of being subject to detainment by mass thugs and wannabe vigilantes, increased risk of suffering injuries due to reckless and illegal acts by rogue federal agents, increased risk of being deported to foreign nations, even if you are an American citizen. And you're at an increased risk of being targeted by federal government for criticizing the president and his friends. Congressional Republicans have completely abandoned their Article I powers and have exchanged their responsibility to their constituents with fealty to the president. They have allowed the president to morph federal agencies into instruments of autocracy. And as a result, the president has been able to ignore federal law, disregard court orders, and implement the largest pay-for-play scheme in American history. The White House, well, what's left of it anyway, is literally up for sale. The federal courts have characterized this presidency as, quote, lawless. In fact, when ruling against illegal acts committed by the administration, a Republican-appointed federal judge stated, quote, the court cannot imagine how the public interest might be served by permitting federal officials to flaunt the very laws they have sworn to enforce. In a separate case where the administration was sued for unlawful acts, the judge, also a Republican appointee, stated, quote, allowing constitutional rights to be dependent upon the grace of the executive branch would be a dereliction of duty by this third and independent branch of government and would be against the public interest. But in another case, the court summed it up perfectly by declaring, quote, as is becoming far too common, we are confronted again with the efforts of the executive branch to set aside the rule of law in pursuit of its own goals. Judiciary Committee Republicans have been completely complicit in this corruption. But since they're so interested in restoring law and order, I have a couple of suggestions on where they can start. Number one, this is the president of the United States standing beside his best friend, Jeffrey Epstein. As we all know, Mr. Epstein is one of the most notorious sexual predators in American history. For 8 weeks, the Republicans on this committee have chosen to protect these two men instead of providing justice to Mr. Epstein's victims. Now the administration is panicking. First, they campaigned on releasing the Epstein files. Then AG Bondi and Associates did a photo op with the files. And she said, and I quote, the Epstein list is on my desk. Then somehow the Epstein list didn't exist. Then the Epstein files became a Democratic hoax. Now the president is supposedly supportive of releasing the files, even though he's currently ignoring a congressional subpoena to do so. Now the president is simply crashing out. And it's because he can't seem to explain his special decades-long relationship with one of the most prominent sexual predators in American history. It's already public that he's in the Epstein files, but his administration is hiding the context of his involvement, if any, with Mr. Epstein's horrific crimes. Now, this is Miss Ghislaine Maxwell. Miss Maxwell, who obviously helped Jeffrey Epstein traffic more than 1,000 women and girls, well, Donald Trump is now giving her special treatment while she's serving out her prison sentence. He won't even rule out giving her a pardon or commuting her sentence. I don't need to explain why pardoning sex traffickers wouldn't be restoring law and order. Now, this is Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Not only has Secretary Noem been busy filming propaganda ads, she's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars. In fact, Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called the Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Secretary Noem win her campaign to become the governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, Her top policy advisor has worked with the firm, and the company's CEO is married to Secretary Noem's chief spokesperson, Mrs. Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. They're stealing money from the American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts. Now we move on to get somebody else. This is the so-called border czar, Tom Homan. Mr. Homan is on tape accepting $50,000 in cash bribes stuffed in a brown paper bag from an undercover FBI agent. Apparently, Mr. Homan accepted these bribes in exchange for awarding federal contracts to his friends. Trump's Department of Justice killed the investigation into Mr. Homan's crimes, and congressional Republicans didn't say a mumbling word. Lastly, this is insurrectionist and Nazi sympathizer Ed Martin. It appears that Mr. Martin is functioning as the Associate Deputy Attorney General, Pardon Attorney, Director of the Fake Weaponization Working Group, and Special Attorney for Mortgage Fraud. All that means is that Mr. Martin is Trump's lapdog, whom the president sends to initiate lawsuits against the president's perceived political opponents. This is what we call organized crime. They're breaking the law, often by stealing taxpayer dollars, covering up their crimes by ending and obstructing investigations, then prosecuting people who call out their unlawful behavior. And while the Republicans are encouraging this corruption, they're abandoning actual victims of violent crime and ignoring the Republican-led state's 21st century murder crisis. In September's appropriation markup, congressional Republicans proposed reducing the FBI staff by thousands of positions and underfunding the agency by more than $1 billion. They've proposed slashing resources from the ATF. They've proposed cutting grants for juvenile justice programs and hate crimes and eliminating the community violence intervention and prevention grants. They're literally defunding the police. So no matter what they say at today's hearing, congressional Republicans have proven that they are not investing in keeping American communities safe from violent crime. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
What Representative Jasmine Crockett laid out is not just a criticism of one president or one party, but a broader warning about how democratic systems can degrade when oversight collapses. Her argument rests on a central claim: that federal institutions meant to serve the public are being repurposed to serve political loyalty and personal protection. At the heart of her statement is the issue of unchecked executive power. She argues that federal agencies, law enforcement, immigration authorities, and the Justice Department are no longer acting as neutral enforcers of the law, but as instruments shaped by political interest. If true, this represents a fundamental shift away from rule-based governance toward discretionary power, where enforcement depends on who you are and whom you oppose. A striking element of her remarks is the reliance on judicial language, including quotes from Republican-appointed judges. This is important because it reframes the issue away from partisan opinion and toward institutional concern. When courts describe executive actions as lawless or warn against constitutional rights being subject to executive grace, it suggests systemic tension between branches of government, a condition democracies historically struggle to survive if left unresolved. Her references to the Epstein case and Ghislaine Maxwell are meant to illustrate a perceived pattern: elite protection and selective accountability. The concern raised is not only about past associations, but about transparency, inconsistency, and obstruction. When public promises to release information shift repeatedly, and when pardons or sentence reductions are floated for individuals tied to serious crimes, public trust erodes. Justice loses legitimacy when it appears negotiable. Crockett also highlights alleged financial entanglements involving government officials and private firms, framing them as examples of pay-to-play governance. Whether every allegation holds up or not, the broader issue is conflict of interest. Democratic systems depend on a clear separation between public duty and private gain. When those lines blur, corruption becomes normalized rather than exceptional. Another key contradiction she points out is around law and order. While tough rhetoric is often used to justify expanded enforcement powers, she argues that actual policy decisions, budget cuts to the FBI, ATF, community violence prevention, and juvenile justice programs, weaken public safety infrastructure. The claim here is that enforcement is being politicized, not strengthened, and that genuine crime prevention is being deprioritized. Her final framing is the most severe: that this behavior resembles organized abuse of power, where investigations are shut down, Allies are shielded, critics are targeted, and public resources are redirected for personal or political gain. Whether one accepts that framing or not, it raises an essential democratic question. Who watches the watchers when oversight bodies themselves fall silent? Ultimately, Jasmine Crockett's statement is less about personalities and more about systems. It challenges viewers to consider whether accountability mechanisms, Congress, courts, law enforcement, and transparency are functioning as designed, or whether loyalty and power are beginning to override law. That question matters regardless of party, because once institutions stop working for everyone, they eventually stop protecting anyone.